Well, good morning, people. Um, it's real early. I can sleep as usual, so I figured I'd get up and tell you guys a story. Um, I was gonna. I got a couple of them that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I'm not sure which one would be more interesting. Well, they'll both be interesting, but um, see, we lived in this old house. I kind of explained it to you a little bit, but it was 3 levels, fourth if you count the attic, and there's only one bathroom in the whole house. And that was downstairs. So there is a lot of traveling in it. Well, I guess I'm just going to tell you about it. That's just the easiest way to do it. Anyways, so downstairs, the living room was half of it, right? Then you had the kitchen and dining room was maybe a quarter of it. And then you had the bathroom, and then you had Grandpa's room and Lucy's room right there. Lucy's room was kind of under the stairs, you know, um, and uh, so then you go up the stairs, you get to the first landing, and straight across from the stairs was my room. My room overlooked the highway. Probably, I don't know, maybe 100 yards to the highway. I mean, it was a good view. And then Janelle's was in the far corner, away from everybody, and then there was a room in between mine and hers. Um, uh, then on the other side, there was uh, Georgine's room, which was right beside mine, but it kind of overlooked the highway too, but it also overlooked the field. Um, and then there was a like a closet, kind of. It wasn't really a room. I mean, it got used as one. Um, and then there's another bedroom on the end. Now, when I talk about bedroom, I think there were like something like 14 by 18 feet. They weren't very big, right? But they're enough. And I think my room was actually the biggest of the room. I don't really remember. And but then you had upstairs, right? The upstairs was kind of divided the same way, and then you had the attic. um, the attic um, had its own stairway going up, and that was also kind of the vault, I guess the best way to put it, because up in the attic uh, was the money room. um, and crazy as that sound, right? We we grew marijuana, uh, like, 5 acres a piece marijuana, you know. Um, so we had a 20-acre parcel that because it wasn't a big deal, right? And that all changed. I don't know what summer it was, 77, 76, 77. Um, and camp police came in and held a big old meeting and told everybody, look, this is the last year you're going to grow. Next year, we take your property. So that was kind of a sad ordeal. But in the meantime, um, we were growing our plants. And um, this had all started long before I showed up, and so when I showed up, uh, like Janelle, Georgine, Grandpa, and me, um, all we had 5 acres to deal with, right? And you think that's a lot of land, but it's not, because you got rows of tree, rows of plants, that you're growing, and you gotta figure, these there's at least you got your hole, and then you got about 5 feet from on each side from the for the plant to grow. So you could get, I don't know, probably 100 plants in an acre, right? And it sounds like a lot, but and it you know, and so anyways, we'd start them in the spring in the greenhouse. Um, they were what people called generation seeds, because there was, you know, like you, from the stories you should know Grandpa, pretty good. I mean, he's methodical if nothing else. Everything's thought out, and you know. So, anyways, um, we all, have our little section we have to take care of. That means you got to make sure they get water, you know, and fertilize and all that stuff. But we get the holes already. Um, when the plants come out of the ground in the uh, fall, from then on, it was they were being fertilized. Like, we get out there and we take the little bucket thing down there and tractor, and we dig the holes out and um, move most of the dirt to the garden area where we grew our garden. Um, and we had people for everything except for the marijuana plant. And there was no way to get to them except for through our property. I mean, what I mean, our property, I mean, right there, we overlooked it. It was like this, and then it sloped down, and then it went straight out, and that's where all the acres were. And then it was a cliff on the edge that went to the river. And then on this side here, it was all cliffed out. And this side here was a kind of a rolling hill, but it was also well protected. Um, you couldn't just come in that way. Anyways, so we'd dig the holes out, um, send a bunch of people down there and load up the buckets and take them up for the garden. And then we'd go to the dairy and um, just load a bunch of cow shit and stuff like that, and just fill up the holes all over again. And generally, we pretty much left it like that until around November or something like that, when the turkeys and uh, chickens and shit like that would come in, and all that the manure from them all went into the holes, and then everything would get covered with straw, and that we'd leave it like that most of the winter. And then in the springtime, when we'd start our plants, and we'd start them in the greenhouse, like I said, and usually around, I don't know, the 1st of June. We'll just put that out there. Sometimes it was earlier, all depend upon the weather. And we'd go out and put our plants in the field. And when we had like cones, I guess the best way to put it, that we just go out there and put over the plants and keep the deer away. And we had dogs that kind of patrolled the area too. They weren't, they were just, pets, but that was their job and they knew what their job was. And just like the cattle dogs, they knew what their job was. Um, and so then we'd, water the plants when they needed it, and then certain times, we'd, I guess about maybe around end of July, we would cut the water off for a week or two. All depends how long it took. Uh, by doing that, it caused the plant to start budding. So once it started budding, then you had to keep an eye on it. Most of the plants were good seeds. They weren't the kind that hermaphrodite on you, but you had to always watch out for that. And we had one plant that we kept in the greenhouse, and it was a big male. And every year it'd get cut back, and but it was close enough, but yet far enough away that it could sense the female plants. All she needed was one, and then this male would just start pollinating, putting off the pollen, and we'd catch it in um, bags, plastic bags. Just put it over the part and shake it, and get the pollen in it, and then we go down and pick a one bud from one plant, and we'd put the pollinated bag over it and shake it up in there really good, and then we'd pull that off and we'd put a, a cloth bag on it, so the extra pollen wouldn't fly off. If it did, it got caught in the bag, but it didn't cause the plant to. And that only took 3 or 4 days, and then you could take that off, and the thing would start to grow again. That part. Anyway, so um, come maybe first week or two in October, when it was getting ready to frost, we'd pull all the plants and we'd bring them up. And we'd hang them in the whole top floor of the place. I mean, every room was full, and we'd hang roots and all. We'd shake the dirt out of it and hang roots and all up there. And then it'd come time to harvest, deal with that. And there were a lot of nights we just sat around, you know, not really manicuring the buds, as they would say, but we'd just take the big leaves off them, you know, uh, and then we'd, you know, uh, let them finish just drying, just hanging upside down. So usually the house was pretty hot, you know, and because it was getting cold out, so we had fire and heat rises, so um, the it was perfect for drying. And so anyway, when they come time, you know, uh, every plant that you took out of the ground, you put your tag on it, and then when it was ready, you harvested down into smaller uh, buckets, you know, which had to make sure they're good dry so they wouldn't mold. And then the calls would start, and we'd make arrangements, and people would come up. Usually all depends. Maybe 3 or 4 at a time, and they'd stay in the rooms, and they'd go through the buds. Okay, this is all this bucket was my buds, and they'd go through and they'd take out the buds they wanted, and then you weighed, and then at the end of the week they'd pay for what they wanted, however much. Um, we were on the average getting, when you could buy it, most people were selling their weed at maybe $200 a pound, and that was good, pretty good weed. We were getting upwards to 1,000 for ours, and because we had big, thick buds, I mean, they were yay big around, and you could compact them a little bit, but not much. They were good, solid buds. So we had a lot of long time customers, and so by the time Thanksgiving comes around, somewhere's in there, most of it's gone. You know, um, I mean, people were loading vans of it, right? And it wasn't like this bricks that they show you on TV. I mean, they were put together nicely. They didn't want to crush them because they were going to, to high profile people. And so, anyways, that's where the money room came in, right? Because everything was paid in cash. So the money room, you had your own little bins, kind of, sort of. And during the year, you know, if you needed cash out of there, you just ask Grandpa. You know, well, he didn't care. But what he didn't want is like, Georgine wasn't so much as a problem. Grandma was a big problem, and Janelle was a pretty big problem because if they had all their money at once, we would have probably gotten into a lot of trouble over it because they would have been buying stupid ass shit, mass amounts of it. So um, that's where uh, Grandma got her allowance from. She was only allowed so much money a month, and that was self-inflicted on her part. She stole Grandpa's checkbook one time and went down and bought a brand new Lincoln Continental, and bought Janelle a 12-string Gibson guitar, and that Gibson was like $12,000 for that thing. I couldn't believe it. Anyways, Grandpa got mad. I don't know why he didn't kill the bitch, but anyways, he ended up, he took the Lincoln from her. He drove that, and anyways, so back to the rooms. So the first and second story was, kind of, taken, and like I said, my room, uh, most from, I don't know, May, March, May, somewhere in there, April. All depends on when the weather started to break. The local bar down the road would have bands come in. Well, the bar sat empty for, I don't know, I can't remember when the old guy died in there. And he had his house, and then he had the bar, and every morning he'd get up. Anyways, he passed away, and it took about a year for the bar to go back up for sale. And somebody, his name was Danny, and uh, him and his wife moved up from Hollywood or one of those big music places, and he had lots of contacts with in the music industry. I think I want to say he was a record producer down there, and but he had a heroin problem, and when he got clean, they moved out of the area to get so he wouldn't, um, get back into it. They hoped. So that's why we had so many bands coming up, and there were a lot of them. Uh, you heard on the radio, had their own 8 tracks out, stuff like that. They'd put out a new 8 track and they'd come up and play up at the house or at the bar, and they'd stay at the house and they'd play there. Anyway, so that's why I moved into the barn in the spring and summer and into fall, uh, because it was my room was needed, because there was a couple of rooms in the house that you didn't go in. Uh, well, you did, but it was Janelle and Georgine. They, over the years of living in the house, they got a bunch of fluorescent glow in the dark paints. And I mean, I know I'm not going to be able to describe it as incredible as it was, but one wall of the house, of the room, which was a pretty big room because it was the top floor, and the only way to get to the attic was through that room. And it was, it had a really substantial door to go up the steps to there, right? I mean, it was, a battering ram door. Anyways, um, had about 15 locks on it too. I mean, um, all steel encased, or iron encased. It was, yeah, it would have taken you would have had to make a hell of a lot of racket to try to get in there. Anyways, but they had taken all these fluorescent paints and they had painted scenes on the walls. The ceiling was all like the galaxy, and stars, and most of it was just, you know, them making it up. Uh, Maybe now would be a good time to point out something too. Janelle, when she went to college to be a chemist, and she learned how to make blotter acid, and that's why she ended up getting kicked out of schools because, yeah, that. And I think she went to Berkeley or someplace like that. I know it was in Southern California. It was one of the major schools down there. Anyways, they frowned on that, so they kicked her out. So when she came home, she kept making it. So we'd drop some acid and go up there, and um, I have no artistic qualities in me. I can't play any instrument. My stick figures are fat. This just I just don't have it. Whereas Janelle and Georgine, they painted this room, and a few other people came up that you know were friends of theirs, and they'd come up and we'd all go up, sit in the room, drop some acid, turn the black lights on, and out come the paint set, and things were drawn on the wall. The wall that had the door for the money room. They made like a mountain scene gold mine thing, scene on there with, the old prospector leading his burros and to the mine with diamonds and emeralds and gold. And there's no mines like that, but on the wall, I mean, and there was ore carts and whatnots, and then you had the other wall that there. Janelle was really, really super into the Beatles, and so I think that wall there was pretty much all the album covers that the Beatles put out, um, and then you had the back wall um, that was kind of a fantasy wall, kind of like the Beatle wall, but it didn't really have a theme. People would come up there and they'd want to doodle or paint. Okay, this that wall there, and then this wall here, same way. They made they made this really cool winding highway down to the bottom with all kinds of things in between and cars on it. It was really cool. And then the floor, they painted fish on on the floor. So like you'd be if you look down into an aquarium, uh, what the fish look like swimming down in the floor. And I'll tell you what, man, you hit acid or two, and you go sit up there, those fish start moving. Crazy, but that was one of the kind of rather unique rooms, and a lot of people saw it. Um, it was something that it was proud. It was it was really cool, and of course, over the course of time, they'd get touched up and whatnot. The paintings, and then you had the costume room right beside it, and those were the only two rooms that weren't rented out or loaned out to the musicians. And Janelle and Georgine and Grandma um, would make costumes, and they wouldn't just make them and hang them, right? They'd make them, and then we'd all get dressed up in costumes, and we'd go different places. Like we'd go to the movies if there was like a say Dracula movie going on, we'd all dress up like you know Wolfman, stuff like that, and Dracula's Bride, the Mummy, and like Grandpa, he dressed up like I guess he what they call Bram Stoker, top hat, dark shades, suit, really nice, suit stuff like that, yeah. Um, Lucy sometimes she participated, but mostly she was like I said, she was just a mean woman, and so those were the only two rooms that were pretty much, I guess, that weren't nobody could stay in. You couldn't spend the night in those rooms. Any of the other rooms, you could. Mostly the third floor, because it was so far to the bathroom. That's why the third floor was pretty much largely empty most of the time. But anyways, and for some ungodly reason, I don't know why, but every room had a rocking chair. And it creeped me out. I didn't like it. I mean, I'd take it, put it in the hallway, and I get yelled at and have to put it back in my room because that's where it belonged. I don't know what the phantom thinking of that was, but The only room that didn't, well, it did actually. I was going to say the painted room, but uh, it actually did have a rocking chair in it, and it was painted, of course, psychedelic. Um, and but the reason why I didn't like mine, because that thing would start moving. You know, it seemed like it'd start moving almost every time. Well, I'd go start try to go to bed. And kind of um, kind of really creeped me out. And it wasn't till um, my girlfriend and I were up there, and we were laying in bed, and the chip trucks went by, big Sierra Pacific chip trucks, and that's how that's why the chair moved, is because they would come down and, on the highway there, and the vibrations from them would cause the chair to rock. And I never realized it for the whole time I was there, up till then. And she pointed it out. And as I'm laying there, I said, "Look at the chair, it's rocking again." She goes, "Yeah, the truck just went by." I said, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, the truck just went by." I said, "What?" "Yeah, so, I mean, there's no wind coming in, so how?" She goes, "You didn't feel it?" I guess it's because I've been so used to it that it was just something that you just don't, you know, you get used to, and so you don't put. Anyways, that's what it was, because we laid there until the next truck went by, which is, they ran almost on the hour, or, you know, um, maybe more. But anyways, when the second truck went by, then the chair had stopped, and the truck went by, it started rocking again. I thought, fuck, man, that was embarrassing. Here all this time, I thought there was a ghost in that damn thing. It was haunted. You know. But that's, anyways. So during the summer months, the place was almost always just jamming. I mean, a lot of the our neighbors and, locals and stuff like that played instruments would show up at the house, and there'd be a big old music thing going on. And some I liked, some I didn't. Uh, Most of the time, like I said, I worked a lot, so I wouldn't get there till late when things were starting to wind down. Um, and we'd have uh, the living room was big enough to where we could dance. Um, but mostly we just set up a stage in there, and people would come down and just jam and dance. The whole floor would be full. You know, like the only time it was quiet is on the weekends when the bands were down at the bar playing. That was crazy. But that was the coolest part about it. But Sunday was generally dead. But I pretty much lived in the barn by then. I'd come in the house in the wintertime because the barn would get real cold, and um, it took a lot to heat. So I didn't really spend a lot of time in the winter in there. I mean, I did. I'd still go in there and dink around on cars and whatnot, get the fire going. And um, but then in the evening, I just, excuse me, migrate back up to the house. And um, but it was a really cool old house, and for a lot of years we thought it was on some Indian burial ground or something. You know, had because you'd wake up some nights and you hear faint chanting in the house. Um, you know, Indian songs, you know, uh, real soft flute sounds, and you know, songs, Indian songs, and that went on for years, um, and we could never figure it out. I mean, there was times we stayed up late at night, all sitting in the dark, quiet as a mouse, waiting for it to happen. And then when it happened, we'd creep around the house trying to figure out where the hell it was coming from, and never did figure that out. Anyways, one day, um, it was night. I got home late, and it was dark and cold out. And for some reason, the back door was jammed up. I couldn't get in. So I had to walk to the front of the house. And as I'm coming around the front of the house, I hear the Indian music, right? Okay, So I, start going slow, creeping, And as you come out the front of the house, the porch, you go to the cars, the driveway right there. There was a big lilac bush right there. And every year we had to cut it back. And then you had a wall from the house that jutted out a little bit, the kitchen jutted out a little bit. So there's a little nook right there. And this old Indian that hung around the place all the time, um, he was sitting there singing, drunk, sitting there drinking the beers, singing his Indian songs. So that put that to rest. I didn't tell anybody. I told Grandpa, but that was it. I figured out, that was one of the secrets, mysteries of the house. And it was pretty funny, really. But it was one of those this really, really old, Victorian style house that was painted, what, I think every 3 years. We Grandpa had it painted. He was proud of it. Like I said, he bought that place when he got out of the army. I don't know, 1944, maybe 45. I don't know, but that's what he used his money to do to buy that house. Um, Grandpa actually passed away in the house. And I don't know if the house is even there anymore. It may be. It was a beautiful house, so it may have stood this time. But the way everything is going nowadays, somebody probably bulldozed it over, redid it. I don't know. I've never been back. After Grandpa died, Grandma ran me off, so I never went back. Never had a reason to. But anyways, that's the story of the house we lived in. I hope you find it entertaining. And it was a really cool place to grow up in. Anyways, thanks for listening. God bless. Have a good day.